What's going on, good people? Long time, me being back in my studio. Uh, been getting moved and getting settled into my new spot. So, between working and getting moved and settled into my new spot, I haven't really had time to come in and do a live video within like a couple of weeks. So, back at it again. Back at it again. So, this video is probably going to be more of a stream of consciousness. Um, as you can see, the title is called The Free Agent Black Man because there are certain things I've been wanting to discuss for a while, particularly the social contract that was destroyed between African American men and African American women, right? And has left the modern day black man in a peculiar place and a place to where a lot of African American women, I'm going to say it like this, assimilated African American women they don't care for. So, before I get started into my stream of consciousness, let me preface this. Let me say this, because this has kind of been on my mind for the last couple of days. The last video that I did was about African American men and why they're choosing to marry African women versus African American women. And I used a segue of my god brother and god sister, having somewhat of an exchange about, African American men marrying African women. Since I've been doing this platform, I've lost quite a few female friends, African American female friends. Hell, I've even lost African American relatives that will not speak to me no more, female type. Let me first of all say this. I really don't care. And I'm going to tell you why. For one, I don't seek female validation. Okay, I only seek validation from the Most High. So I don't look for any woman to make me feel completed or make me feel like what I'm saying is approved by her. That's not going to get me to the place where I need to be at. So what it does lead me to be, what it leads me to be is free to speak the way that I need to speak without fear of female retribution. And that's very key in this environment because most men, particularly African American men, well, I'm going to say, because the dynamics are changing, a large part of African American men are afraid to say what they need to say because they're afraid of their woman's response. I'm not afraid of my woman's response. And if I had to be afraid of my woman's response, I would have never married her. Because I'm going to speak and do what the Most High has commanded me to do. And I don't really care how many feathers that ruffle. All right. The only way that a woman, because what I'm talking about on this platform is I'm talking about character. And I'm talking about a godly character and how we are supposed to restore a lost family. Now, this video, I'm going to go into that in a little bit more detail on this live stream. But I just want to say that. So, like I said, I've had, relatives say things to me and, I've had friends say things to me. I've had female friends that won't even speak to me anymore because of some things that I've said on either my Facebook page or my YouTube channel that they just didn't like. And, I never, unless I directly address you, I'm not talking to you. I'm just really speaking in general. I'm speaking about what I see. I'm speaking from my own experience. And like I said, I back it up with biblical knowledge. So if me stating that African American men want women to be submissive and cooperative bothers you, If you feel like your significant other hearing my message as a woman, if you feel like them hearing my message as a woman makes them more in danger, makes you more in danger of losing them, well, let me be honest with you. You're lying to yourself thinking that you are a good wife, because no good woman could ever hear my message. No godly woman, no woman with an excellent character can never hear my message and feel like her significant other will leave her. It's not possible. It's not possible. Number one. Number two, men know what they have. Men know what they have. All right. And no man is looking when he's already full and satisfied. I promise you, you don't go out looking for dinner when you already got dinner in your belly. Most men cannot be swayed to leave their woman by another man unless he gay. And I'm not a booty bandit, baby girl. And I don't deal with booty bandits. I'm just going to put it like that. So with that being said, let me get into my actual purpose of this video. I'm not going to make this a long stream, maybe about 20 minutes. So let me get into this actual live, what this live is about. Let me pull something up. And I put this in an earlier video that I did, but I find it, I need to share it again. I want to pull this up to segue into what sorry about that. I want to read this. Look at this. And like I said, I've done this before. But it says, Black women were more likely to be married than white women until 1970 then. Okay, there's a number of factors that plays into this thing, but there's two main factors that actually does. Now I'm going to read this. It says the U.S. Census Bureau released a report that studied the history of marriage in the United States in 2012. They discovered some startling statistics when calculating marriage by race. The report found that historically, African Americans aged 35 and older were more likely to be married than white Americans. This was true from 1890 until sometime around the 1960s, when only 5 to 6% of Black women aged 35 and older were not married. Okay, just to put that into further context, that means 94 to 95% of all Black women in this country aged 35 and older were married. During the same time, the percentage of white women not married was closer to 10% and just over 10% for white men, while just under 10% for Black men. The first two charts are charts included in the report. Only the headings have been altered by blackdemographics.com to outline these findings. So they're saying they haven't did anything. They just only put the heading up here. Now I want you guys to take a look at this chart. Let me make sure you guys can see this clearly. Let me put that up there. Now, let me make sure you can see this clearly. So I want you to look at this chart. All right. This is white women right here. This is white women's little bar right here. It's been pretty consistent the entire time. Right? There's white women. Here go Black women right here. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this graph. Look at this graph. 1960s. All of a sudden, spike. 1970, 1980, 1990, 2000s, 2010. Look at that. I said Black men until the 1960s were more likely to be married than white men. Look at it. Look at the bar. You go white men. You got a little intersection right here in the 1940s. Look, 1960s, boom. Got a flat line throughout the 80s. Then look at that spike from 80 to 20 to the 2000s. Look at that. Now, part of it was the war on drugs. And I've talked about that. That's why when I did a video, uh, checking Dr. Boyce Watkins for the things that he says that I feel like are asinine, I talked about Joe Biden. I didn't mention him, but I didn't mention Strom Thurmond, but Strom Thurmond had a lot to do with it. Most African American people do not know politics. That's the problem. You don't really pay attention to the things that are affecting you, right? You take people who never had your best interest at heart, you take their word for it, and their word isn't trustworthy. Now, Joe Biden and Strom Thurmond was a Dixiecrat. A lot of the Dixiecrats went into the Republican Party, all right? But they came up with policies. Nixon first put some stuff in place in the 70s, but it really didn't spike until whose years? Reagan, Bush, and Clinton. Now, throughout this whole administration right here, over here to the right, you see it's highlighted in yellow. Okay? Those when all those policies were passed. Look at black man in prison. 23,370 in the 1900s, 1910. Look at it by 1990 to 2000. Almost 600,000 black men were in prison. Almost 600,000. Now, why am I talking about this in relation to the free agent black man? First off, what did they do? I'm gonna leave this graph up here. But in the 60s, we had the civil rights movement. Right after the civil rights movement, look at that, from 1954 to 1968. Right after the civil rights movement, they declared a war on drugs. So what did they do in the 60s, late 60s? They offered black women welfare. That was to split this up, because this was only accomplished by black women and black men working together. And white women were jealous of the power that African American women had within this movement, the respect that African American women had within this movement. They had a problem with the white man, so they came and enlisted the African American woman, because they knew without her, this wasn't going to happen. Civil rights movement does not happen without African American women. All right? Black men were the foundation, and it was spears and all that. But black women held it down for their men. They were right there. They were right there with us, right? So they pulled you off the civil rights movement, and it gave black women a deal. White women got what was supposed to go to the black man to support his family, and they gave black women trinkets when it comes to welfare, food stamps, all of that other stuff. All that happened during this time frame, right? Because you got to show black people stuff. You got to show African American people. You got to show them, right? What did they do to black men? They did a war on drugs. Now, what y'all don't know is cocaine was a very prominent drug in the 60s and the 70s. Just powder cocaine. Powder cocaine was more expensive to gain. It was more expensive to obtain. Usually you had to have more wealth. We know black people didn't have a whole lot of wealth, so it was a white drug. It was a drug that primarily white people use, and rich people. Rich Prime was on cocaine real bad. Many celebrities, Rick James and all of them, right? So around the 80s, what did the Reagan administration do? I talked about this in one of my other videos, right? They did what they call the Iran-Contra scandal, all right? To where there was a couple of American soldiers or Marines that was taken hostage in Lebanon, and the Reagan administration thought it was going to be a good idea to negotiate with Iran to basically the release of the Marines. Now, how does that have anything to do with anything? Well, America said, we're going to pay you $30 million if y'all release the Marines, get the Marines to be released. And we're going to give you that because during this time, Iran and Iraq was in a war. It lasted from 1980, I want to say, to 88. It was an 8-year war, right? So what they did is they took, I think Iran only received about 12 million of those from that arms deal. The rest of it went to the Nicaraguan countries, right? It was illegal. United States government found out about it, Senate found out about it, and you can look it up on YouTube and other historical platforms. But basically, they tried to hold the administration accountable for it. The reason why America decided to fund the Nicaraguan countries is because they wanted democracy in Latin America, right? They didn't want, Latin America is ruled by many dictators, so they wanted democracy down there. So they was trying to help the countries overthrow the Nicaraguan government, right? Didn't happen, but the countries had to be funded by something. So what they did, they allowed the countries to sneak drugs into America, and they brought those drugs into Black America. And they put these drugs on the streets in your neighborhood. If any of y'all grew up in the 80s, you remember the crack era and how terrible it was. Beautiful Black women walking around on drugs, families destroyed, right? The mothers are crackhead, the fathers in prison. They took the jobs out of the community, and they put drugs in there and make a whole bunch of drug dealers. Look at the number. Look at the war on drugs. Look at the number. It shows you right here. Look at the spike. The United States government did that. But they put the drugs in the community. Then they needed to clean up the community when the Contra scandal failed. When the Contras failed to overthrow Nicaragua. So they put a series of policies to clean up the community. And Joe Biden and Strom Thurmond were the architects behind those policies. In 2020, who was the people that was instrumental in Joe Biden getting into office? What demographic? They take pride in it. African American women. Now, let me close this out so I can just go ahead and do my stream of consciousness. Now, so let's go back. Slavery, the Emancipation Act, the Emancipation Proclamation was passed in, I think, 1863 or 1864. But Black people didn't receive word. No, it was 1863 because the war ended like 2 years later. The war ended in 1864, I want to say. But that's why we celebrate Juneteenth, because Black people didn't get word till a whole year later in Texas that the war was over and they were free. Now, you had 10 years of Reconstruction. So Reconstruction lasted to around the 1880s, right? African American men and African American women found themselves in a unique position. You see, African American men and African American women were never brought over here to be a counterpart to one another. African American women were never brought to be the mate to African American men. That's not what they did. African American men were the workhorse and African American women were the wombs, right? And when they ended the African slave trade over here, Thomas Jefferson did, wasn't because he just had a consciousness. Like, it wasn't because he just had a bad conscience. No, they did it so they could enrich themselves. The American Slave Coast covers this, the book American Slave Coast. So when they ended the African slave trade, you have the American slave trade. All right, where you had the breeding farms and the plantations that was in Virginia and Maryland and all the northern states, or the borderline northern states, and they would ship them to all the southern states, right? African American women were unprotected. The men couldn't do anything to stop it, and most of these women they weren't from the same culture. White people didn't pick Black people because they were from the same culture and all that. No, they picked you because you were just if you were black, they deemed you to be a pagan worshiper, unholy. So the Pope passed edicts for Africans to be a slave. That's a whole nother video. But driving my point home, African American women weren't brought here to be the counterpart to African American men. But after slavery ended, we were brothers and sisters in the same plight. So we banded together and we tried to make a community based off the fact that we were former slaves. This is the truth. Anybody else telling you something, they're telling you a lie. This is the truth, right? Now, we could talk about the Hebrew aspect of it, and I really truly believe that, but I'm not going to focus on that for right now. I'm just going to focus on the relationship between the African woman and the African American man, the African American man and the African American woman. So what they did is they got together and she agreed to be his woman and he agreed to be her man, right? And she understood that you're going to be my protection. You're going to be my guide. You're going to be my provider, and I'm going to be your aid. The same way marriages are supposed to happen, she agreed to that. And they went through everything together. They were building communities. Black Wall Street isn't the only community that was burned to the ground. For all my Georgians, one of those massacres happened in Camilla, Georgia. Go about 130 miles south, Rosewood, Florida. These settlements was popping up all over the place because black people were excluded from white society. So they decided to band together and make their own societies. But whenever white people seen that black people were being successful, they came and burned it down. Right? They came and burned it down. But the social contract had been signed between African American women and African American men up until the 1960s. Up into the 60s. So after the civil rights movement was accomplished, the white woman came to pillage the African American woman. And that's what she did. They gave you welfare, child support, government housing. The only thing you couldn't do is have that man inside your house. You couldn't do it. You couldn't have that man inside the home. Okay? So the war on drugs happened. They're locking your men up. They're locking your men up. They were locking your former man up because you broke the contract. And African American men understand this. They were locking him up because they understood that if we dope you out and we lock the man up, ain't no way in the world that you can come together to overcome white supremacy. But I'm not going to focus on that part. So now what happens? You got a bunch of fatherless women and fatherless men. So now African American women are telling the girls to, you can't be reliant upon an African American man. He ain't no good, because that's what white men and the white society has told everybody, right? And she believed it. She bought into it. So the African American woman went back to her status as the white man's concubine. And the black man went back to his status as the tool for white America. That is until the age of the internet came around. That is until you basically got the world history at your fingertips. We call that Google, right? That is until black men all around the country start connecting. And he understood something. After years of trying to ask the woman to come back to the relationship, he understood that he had officially been let go of his contract. He had been released. Got none of the things that he was promised for in his contract, but had been released to be on his own. And for a long time, he worked out and tried and do everything to prove to his woman, or his former woman, say it correctly, that she should resign him. But why would she resign you when everything that you can provide, she's already getting from the government? And then something happened, an epiphany happened. After 400 years, according to prophecy, a light bulb went off in African American men's head. And they actually realized that, hey, I am a free agent. Right? And there are some African American men that are willing to negotiate with that former team that, the woman that they was once with. But there's a lot of them that are not. So what are they doing? They're going back to their roots. They're going back to Africa. They're reconnecting with their culture. You got other races of women that now who have hiccups with her man coming to the African American man and saying, I will be everything that you need. Only be my husband. See, here's the thing about being a free agent. Here's the thing about being a free agent. You have two different things that are two different things that are happening. You have your market value and you have your self-worth. Right? African American men for a long time have been told that they didn't have any self-worth. So, how do I say this? They're just not starting to realize that they're more valuable than what they've been told. And other races of women have started to realize that the African American men are more valuable than what she's been told. They're more reliable, right? So that's why he's not choosing you anymore, African American man, because you didn't, African American woman, because you broke the contract. And if you want to be back with this free agent African American man, you're going to have to renegotiate the terms of the contract, because you were never brought over here to be his woman. But y'all just stuck together and tried to fight it out together, right? But these brothers are going back to Africa. They're going to Brazil. They're going to wherever African women are, and they're taking wives from there because we're kinsmen, just like you are his kinsman. When a man knows his worth, man, you're not going to be able to convince him to settle for less. So that's why African American woman, he's demanding much of you now. He may not have done it before because he was told that he wasn't worth anything, but now he's demanding a hell of a lot of you. And the only way you're going to be his woman again is not on your terms, it's on his, because he realizes his worth. He understands that he has the right to be the head of his house. He understands, just like every other man on this planet, well, more than any other man on this planet, that he was made in the image and the likeness of the Most High. Because we know the African man is the original man, right? And every other man is a derivative of the African man, right? So he's the original man, made in the image and the likeness of Yahuwah Elohim. So this man understands his worth now. And if you want to be his woman again, when you come to the negotiation table, you're going to have terms that he deem are favorable for him. You can't be able to come back to this man anymore. No longer will these men take care of your bastard children. No longer with these guys be in a family to where he's not respected and head as the head of his house. It's not going to happen. Now, me personally, I think that once somebody has proven to you that they're going to do you wrong, they're going to do you wrong again. And a lot of y'all might not like to hear me say that. There's some good African American women. There's some good sisters out there. But unfortunately, you guys are in the minority. And by large part, I don't think African American men should give y'all the time of the day unless you dramatically change your character. But why would you? You have every incentive not to. You're still going to get your government assistance. You're still going to get your daggone government housing. You're still going to be able to put men on child support. You still have the laws in your favor. So if you walked away from him, he's going to have to pay you. What incentive do you have to come back to the table? The reason why people didn't want to end slavery is because slavery was so profitable for them. When you ask people to go against the almighty dollar, for God, more than likely they don't do it. Most people want to serve two gods when the Bible specifically tell you that you can't. So most people choose money. They choose their own security versus duty. I mean, we're watching these children be born out of wedlock and coming out of broken homes, and African American women. I'm just gonna be honest with y'all. In large part, it's you guys' fault. I don't care if nobody get mad at me. It's mostly our fault. Because you don't want to come back and you don't want to give up these trinkets that they've offered you. And that's why your man is a free agent. And he's negotiating with you now from the standpoint of a free agent. He has to have terms favorable for him to order to enlist you to be back on his team again. You've abandoned him before. What makes him think you won't abandon him now? Let's just be honest. During the war on drugs, most of these guys was young cats out here selling drugs, trying to make a living because the father had been taken out of the home. He'd been rounded up as political prisoner. There's so much stuff that you guys just honestly don't want to talk about because it doesn't matter what the African American men say. You're still going to blame him for it. Let's just be honest. Why? Most of these guys were not in their homes no more. They was taken from you. But the very person that took them from you, the very person that you put right back in office, these men see this. They understand. They understand that you're not changing. They understand that you are not going to come back and renegotiate the contract in the terms that favorable to him. He understand that. He understand that you want to give him a lowball offer. Despite he want to have one of them Steph Curry contracts. All right. Steph Curry had a contract early on when Golden State won their first couple of championships that was so favorable for them. Now he's reaping the benefits on the back end. He don't sign $200 million contracts. Why? Him knowing that he has the talent of a Steph Curry, or him knowing that that's his value, that how pivotal he is to a team. Why do you think that he would come back and negotiate a contract with you and you haven't changed your requirements? What do y'all want from these men? Let's just be honest. Most of it is emotion. You don't want to be his wife. You don't want to submit. You don't want to raise his children. You want him to come and take on children that was produced by other men. These men realize that they're valuable. They ain't coming back to the table. Most of them ain't coming back to the table. But if they do come back to the table, man, if you ain't talking good, if you ain't trying to get him a signing bonus, if you ain't trying to get him a long-term deal that's favorable for him, he not coming back. He a free agent. That's what the Manosphere and the Red Pill and SYSBM and Passport Bros and all of those cats, that's what it's all about. And like I said in the beginning, I'm bringing this video to a close. You can be mad at me all you want, but the truth is the truth. If me telling these men their worth and their value upsets you and makes you afraid, then baby girl, you are a person that wasn't a very good wife to him in the first place, and you know it. You just don't want to change it. That's all I got to say, man. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Shalom.